name's Maureen Kenny. I'm the Dean at the Lynch School of Education, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the Fall Lynch School Symposium. We're very honored to have Kathy Mears, Superintendent of the Archdiocese of Boston, with us this evening. One of the 7 pillars of excellence of the Lynch School highlights the importance of school and community partnerships that link inquiry and action and prepare effective professionals committed to enhancing the human condition and making the world more just through education and applied psychology. The Archdiocese of Boston is one of our most highly valued educational partners, and we are honored to have Kathy with us today as we consider ways to enhance and strengthen our collaboration. Kathy will offer her vision for the Archdiocese schools. Before we introduce Kathy, I'd like to take a moment to reflect on the recent loss of Carolyn A. Lynch and to recognize her contributions to the Lynch School of Education and to Catholic education in the city of Boston. Carolyn's spirit, vision, and generosity have strengthened and supported our work in preparing high-quality professionals and increasing opportunities that enhance the religious and educational development of the children of Boston and beyond. We hope to honor her legacy through enacting our commitment to the Lynch School and excellence in our collaborations. It's now my pleasure to invite Dr. Patty Weitzel O'Neill, Executive Director of the Roach Center for Catholic Education, to the podium to introduce Kathy Mears. The Roach Center works with the Lynch School in carrying out our collaborative vision in linking inquiry, action, and professional development, especially as it relates to Catholic education. Patty?
Thank you. It's my privilege to introduce a dear friend and colleague, Kathy Power Mears. Kathy is somebody that I've known for a number of years, and so I'm going to skip the printed word here for a moment and just let you know that this is a highly creative, innovative thinker and doer. When you want something done, and you want it done well, and you want it done with just the right touch of creativity and pizzazz, you call Kathy Mears. I've known Kathy since she was with the Diocese of Indianapolis, where she was the assistant superintendent, and did some pretty amazing work, and in particular, worked with a lot of us in convincing us that it was the data that would give you a lot of the answers and to pay attention to the data. And for that, many, many people in Catholic education are thankful today. I also had the privilege of serving on the search committee with Joe O'Keefe for the Archdiocese of Boston. And I can tell you that it was a thrilling, unanimous decision and day when Kathy was selected to be the superintendent for the Archdiocese of Boston. She is currently just completed developing her strategy and her plans for the diocese. But she didn't do this just off the top of her head. She spent many, many hours and miles on the road speaking to the constituents that she is working with. In particular, spending time not only with the principals and the teachers, but talking to all of the pastors. And those of you who know about Catholic education, that's a critical factor in really understanding what it is that you're about to undertake. And so I, with great pride and pleasure, introduce to you the superintendent for the Archdiocese of Boston Catholic Schools, and somebody that I hope that we will all be working with very diligently in many, many years to come. So, Kathy?
Thank you. It's nice to be here. When I speak, I never stand with a microphone and I never read. I'm going to try to do both of those things tonight, so we'll see how this goes. When Maureen called me, she said, I'd like you to talk at our symposium, and if you could do it October 5th, it'd be really great. And I said, well, yeah, I'd like to do that, so what should I talk about? And she said she wanted me to talk about Catholic education in the Archdiocese of Boston, and since that's a subject I know and love, I said yes. So, I am now the superintendent of the Archdiocese of Boston for 1 year and 2 weeks. And I don't know how that happened, except Patty had something to do with it. So how did the farm girl, she just said, I didn't call you a farmer, so I'll call myself that. How did the farm girl from a town of 400, yes, 400 in Illinois, get to Boston, the fourth largest diocese in the United States? The town that I am from is so small that everyone has his or her name put on the welcome sign at some time. That is my mother-in-law. It was my father-in-law who was mayor. It was his idea. So even in towns of 400, you can have a lot of creative people. So how did I get to Boston? Well, it's really very simple. I kept learning, and God kept providing opportunities. And I learned to say yes. So Cardinal Sean said, please come and work with me, even though I told him that I wouldn't like winter, and then you guys gave me the winter of a lifetime last year. But I came. He said, if you will come and work with me, our work will be blessed. And so I said, okay. And so here I am. So Catholic education in 2015 has as many opportunities as I, the farm girl from Illinois, has ever had. There are over 13 million Catholics under the age of 18 in the United States, and they all need an education. 13 million, think about that. In the Archdiocese, there are 156,000 children enrolled in religious ed. We have about 38,000 enrolled in our schools, 156,000 in religious ed. And all of these children, they need to be educated. They need to learn about reading, writing, and arithmetic, and they need to learn about the earth and the stars and all of God's creation. They need to study history and math and art, and they need to learn about the God who created them and loves them, and Christ who will save them. They need all of that. They need to learn of the many opportunities that await them, and they need to learn to say yes to God, to themselves, and to each other. So what are the opportunities that await Catholic education in the Archdiocese of Boston and really the nation? What are the riches that will await us if we learn to say yes? So it begins with our students and their families. One of the best things about Catholic education is that when you ask teachers what they like about their job, almost all of them reply, "How are kids? We have great kids." Have you heard that? I have. And it is true. Our kids are great. Even with all of their differences and little annoyances, they are wonderful. This morning I was at Mass with Cardinal Sean, and he was to bless the preschoolers before Mass because they weren't going to go to Mass. So they were sitting on the grass outside, and one of the 3-year-olds leaned back on his back, put his leg up in the air and said, "See my new shoes, Cardinal?" You cannot pay for entertainment like this, I'm telling you. And the Cardinal said, "Yes, those are very spiffy." And the kid had no idea, but he said, "Thank you." So it was all good. Our kids are good. So our kids are respectful and compliant. They are bright and creative. They have all the potential that God could ever put into a little body, and we, all of us in this room, are given the opportunity to shape their minds and their futures. We are able to work with their families, we assist their parents, and form a bond. Over the course of the 8, 9, 10, or 12 years that they are with us, we create a family for these students that may be stronger and richer than the family that they belong to at home. Father Richard Jacobs says that education is an intimate conversation between souls. How poetic is that? It implies a special relationship, a relationship built on love. Remember in Winnie the Pooh, Piglet asks Pooh, "How do you spell love?" And Pooh replies, "You don't spell love, you feel it." That's what our students feel. They feel our love and care of them, and by your love and care, they begin to understand the love of Christ. It is our relationship with our student that is a model for the relationship we should all have with Christ. And just think about that. That is a gift that we get to share in each and every day. Lots of opportunity there to bring lots of children to Christ. In Indiana, we teach students in Catholic schools about St. Theodora Guerin, who founded the Sisters of Providence, and they have worked, the Sisters of Providence have worked in schools in the Archdiocese of Boston. Saturday, October 3rd, was her feast day. One day, Mother Theodora received a letter from a young sister who was teaching in Madison, Indiana, a town on the Ohio River, and the young sister wrote, "Dear Mother, the children are incorrigible. They talk without permission, they don't do their homework, and their work isn't neat. Sometimes they are late for school." That could have been written last night, but it was written 168 years ago. See, our kids don't change. They're the same. St. Theodora's response was, "Dear sister, you must love the children first, then you teach them." That's the opportunity, the promise of Catholic education. These simple words that describe the order in which we are to do things remain the same as when she wrote them 168 years ago. In Catholic schools in the Archdiocese of Boston, we must love our students first, then we may teach them. All of our students come to us needing lots of different things. Some of them need food, some of them might need new shoes, but all of them need love, and that's our job, our opportunity. We are blessed to call our students, our children, our students, and they provide us with the opportunity to teach them and mold them in the ways of the Lord. They and their parents have said yes to us. Think about it. Their parents could send their children anywhere, and they pick us. And they pick us because we love them first, and then we teach them. And that's important. So we need to personally invite more students. Everybody talks about enrollment problems. What are we doing? Are we inviting them to share in the fun? Are we inviting them to the party that is Catholic education? No one has more parties in Catholic schools. But not only do we have parties and celebrate the good things of life, we do teach them about Christ and give them that opportunity. We teach them reading, writing, and arithmetic. So we need to extend the invitation. If everybody in this room asked one person, would you bring a child, your child, to Catholic education, we would increase our enrollment. It really is as simple as us inviting others to join us. Catholic education has many, many supporters. Right now, I'd like you to think of 3 people in your school who supports you. 3 people who support you. Think of them, please. You can write their names down, but think of 3. Maybe they give money to your school. Maybe they give up their time. Perhaps they share their talents by volunteering when you need something done. But think about their names. Think why they joined you and why they help you. Here's the deal. You can think of 3. My guess is that you could probably think of 5. And if you can think of 5, you can probably think of 7. And if you think of 7, you can probably think of 2 more who would join you if, again, we would just ask them. Part of the new evangelization is simply reaching out and inviting people to join us. We need to do that. When is the last time anyone in this room asked somebody, have you considered Catholic education? Sometimes we wait for them to come to us, and if we would simply ask, we might have more people in our schools. We need to extend the invitation. That's part of what we need to do. People are waiting for us to ask. That's what they're waiting for. They want to be a part of something big. They want to be a part of something that is doing good. And they want to have the opportunity to say yes. So extend that invitation to them. Let them be a part of something great. Let's invite them to join us. Let them experience some of the joy that we are allowed to feel in our work. I think that if we just invite people, it would make all the difference in the world. You know, my dad is 92, and he always says yes if somebody invites him to anything. It's the truth. And my mother-in-law, who passed away in May, she was just the opposite, because she never wanted to ask for help. She never wanted to be a burden. And she always said no. And the difference between my father's quality of life and my mother-in-law's quality of life is this much, because he always says yes. Always. If I'm coming, he will call and tell me. He said, somebody invited me to lunch, so I'm going to have to go to lunch, but I'll be back to see you. He does not turn down an invitation. He always says yes. And as his daughter lives 1,000 miles away from him, do you know how grateful I am that people invite him? That people extend that invitation? That's what we're called to do. Let's extend the invitation. Invite them to our schools, invite them to Mass, invite them to something so they can learn of the joy of Christ. It makes a difference. I want to talk for a moment about one of the people who always said yes, and that was Carolyn Lynch. The whole school is named in her honor, the School of Education. She often said yes, and she and her husband Peter have literally helped thousands of students achieve a better education because of their work. She took advantage of what God gave her and gave back generously. Now think about it. Everybody can give something back. Most of us aren't going to have the kinds of wealth that she had, but all of us have something to give back, and she gave back generously. Her life reminds us that we have all been blessed by God, and all of us, like Carolyn, need to respond generously to the call. We need to remember her benevolence and respond accordingly. After all, think about it, 3 weeks ago she had no idea this would be happening to her. That's how quickly it happens. Don't we all want to be remembered as generous people? Think about it. 3 weeks ago, most of us would have said, wouldn't it have been neat to be Carolyn Lynch? That's probably what we would have said. So we need to let her life be a reminder to us that we want to be remembered as someone who said yes, that we want to be remembered as people of generosity. And it is not always about money. In fact, I like to think it's seldom about money. It's usually about other things. I notice that everyone who talks about Carolyn says she gave of her time. She visited the schools. She just didn't write a check. She did more than that, so we need to do that. So Carolyn, rest in peace. I want you to think about those who came before us and have worked to build our Catholic school system. These are some lovely sisters who I had the privilege of having Mass with, the Sisters of Notre Dame. I want you to think about all the educators in this room. Look around you. All these people believe in Catholic education. We have college professors here. We have first grade teachers. We have high school administrators. We have assistant superintendents, technology teachers, teachers who are in their 20s, and teachers who have spent more than 35 years in Catholic education. They are here because they are dedicated and they are lifelong learners who realize that things have changed and need to continue to change if we are to move forward. If you look at the picture, you can realize medicine has changed, farming has changed. The green picture is my dad's tractor, just so you know. And Catholic education, we kind of look the same. Why is that? Our foundations of faith should absolutely remain the same, but I suggest to you other things should have changed and need to change. Let's go back to that farmer there, my dad. So when he started farming in 1934 at the age of 11, okay? My grandfather died when my dad was 11 years old, and he was the oldest boy, so he was to farm the 80 acres. And he had 2 mules and his little brother who was 7, okay? That's what he had. My grandmother was a single mother of 9 children in the Depression, so they had no money. So you talk about children in poverty, that would be my dad's family, okay? You talk about a single mother, that's my dad's family. And yet, somehow, some way, my grandmother raised this man, my father, to be a farmer, to be a very good farmer. And so now that tractor you see there, it is controlled by GPS. He doesn't even have to touch it. All of his fields are mapped by GPS. He has a monitoring system that when he plants corn, knows how many seeds to put in the ground on each spot where they drop a seed based on the soil temperature, the moisture in the soil. You know, he's come a long ways from 2 mules, right? 80 acres to 1,900 acres, 1,800 acres of the finest farmland in the world, literally. That's a long ways to come. And how did that happen? Because his mother raised him by reading to him every night, Kipling, Dickens, lots of things. And again, Grandma did not have to compete with TV and the internet. I get that. And she raised them by making them say the rosary every night. And she raised them to work hard. And I think that those 3 things should probably remain the same in our families, that we should pray together, that we should work together and we should keep learning together, because if there's one thing I know, my dad still learns. He reads the Wall Street Journal every day, okay? I fear for the day if he would ever lose his eyesight, because that's what he does. You know, he reads. He still farms a little bit. He was on the combine yesterday, so we'll see, which makes everybody nervous. But as he said, you know, it really does everything. He just has to sit there. Not the combine, I'm sorry. Yeah, the combine, he was. So medicine's changed, farming's changed, Catholic education. What changes can we look forward to? When you reflect on Catholic education and why you're here tonight, I hope that you're thinking about, what could I do a little bit differently? Because you said yes to be here. You're already opened up to the possibilities that there are. You're already proving your dedication to be here. You are committed professionals who want to help, and for that I am very grateful, and so are our students. We need to help develop our teachers and make them the best professionals that we can. We understand that my dad kept learning. Think about it, when he left high school in 1940, he never thought he'd ever take another chemistry test in his life. But he took a chemistry test last year, because in the state of Illinois, if you were to put chemicals on your farm, you have to pass a chemistry test. And so he has to go in every year and take the chemistry test. Now, why he's doing it now, I'm not really sure, because my brother could do it, but I think he just likes proving passive. So, but think about it, he's kept learning, and it serves him well. The future belongs to those who keep learning and are willing to roll with it. You have to roll with it. You don't know what's coming about. So let's keep going there. We now know how the brain functions during learning. We need to take that information and help our teachers and teach them. We know how to use a blended learning model that maximizes learning. We know about learning differences so that we can change our instruction. We know that we can teach our children how to get to Boston College if they want to come here when they're 18, or more importantly, how to get to heaven. Opportunity exists everywhere in our schools, and all we really need to do is say yes to the possibilities, and then God will provide the rest. We have people who love Catholic education, who love God, and who love their students. They are ready to care for and teach every single day. We are so blessed in this archdiocese. We just need to remind ourselves and count our blessings. Everybody can tell you everything that's wrong with Catholic education, but there is so much that is right. Let's concentrate on what is right and move forward. So we have teachers, we have parents, we have all these people on this slide here who love Catholic schools, and we want to work every day for our students, but we have even more abundant resources. In addition to our great families, our great students, our wonderful teachers and administrators, we have even more. We have our faith. We have our future, and we have our students, and most importantly, we can say yes. We do not have to say no. We can say yes. St. Francis says to start by doing what is necessary, then do what's possible, and suddenly you're doing the impossible. I am not Pollyanna. I know that our enrollments are declining and the finances are a problem for everybody in this room. I know that not everyone wants a Catholic school education. We have 156 children who have chosen religious education. Yet I am not deterred. I know that God asked me to serve here. I know He asked you here to serve. I am passionate about the work that you and I do each day. It is important work. We are building saints and scholars, and I'm grateful to call you my colleagues, and I'm grateful that you're willing to work with me, because we are making a difference. We are making a difference. Even the little boy who races like to say it got new shoes. He learned about a cardinal today, and Cardinal Sean smiled at him, and for all he knows, cardinals are all great people who smile at you. What a nice beginning to your life. So we have to get to work. Let's look at what we do and what we could do even better. You said we're going to collaborate. We have already started. We're going to continue to collaborate. Who else could we collaborate with? Who else was just waiting for that invitation? Let's invite them to join us. Let's invite them to come with us. Let's consider new curriculums that will require us as educators to learn new ways, new things, so we can reach even more students. I have a business card right here because I'm going to find out about Discovery Schools, because that might be a new curriculum that could help some of our students in the Archdiocese. We also want to make sure that we're considering things like foreign immersion language programs, language immersion programs. We might want to consider a medical arts high school. One of my dreams is that we'd have a medical arts high school. Do you know that there are over 1,000 kids waiting in this Commonwealth of Massachusetts to go to a technical high school. Why on earth we don't have a Catholic technical high school, I don't know, but we can get one. You know what the naysayers say? The first thing out of their mouth is how you're going to pay for it. And seriously, I am not going to worry about that because I believe God will provide. The Sisters of Providence taught me, Providence will not fail you. Just keep moving forward. Those people want to detract us from our mission and our goal. We cannot be distracted by them. Let's keep moving forward. I also want to say that we really want to work and reach out to children who might be more challenging to teach and invite them to learn in our schools. As a church, we dedicate this month of October to life. How important is it then that we work with families and do everything we can to help them to educate all of their children? We ask all women to have any children that they conceive. We ask them to give birth to their babies, even if they know that their baby isn't going to be born perfect. By the way, I had 2 babies, neither one were perfect. It's just the way it is. When we ask women to do that is right, that is good, that's what we should do. But then how can we walk away and say, but we're not going to help you educate that child? How can we do that? I don't think we can anymore. The rest of the country in Catholic education are educating lots of children, and in the Archdiocese of Boston, we have at least 2 schools that are educating children with Down syndrome. We have an opportunity to do this, and we must seize it. The same with immigrant children. Are they harder to teach? Yes, they are. When I was in school, everybody had to take a class in special needs. Even though I'm that old, that was a requirement way back when. Now, teachers take 1 course in special needs before they graduate. You people who teach in our schools, when you were in that course, did they say, you can leave now because you're going to teach in a Catholic school and you'll never have to do this? Or did you have to stay in the class with everybody else? See, we always say we don't have enough education, but the truth of it is we have the exact same education as our colleagues. We do. We have the exact same education. Now, if they're a special ed teacher, they have more, but the general classroom teacher, all of them who graduated from a college in Massachusetts have the same kind of education. So it's about us opening our hearts and saying we can do more. Do I think we can take every single child in the Archdiocese? Probably not. We'll never have that many resources. Do I think we could take more children? Yes, I do. And we're leaving a lot of federal money on the table that could help us with that, but we're trying to fix that. So this right to life issue to enroll all children is one that we're going to work on in the Archdiocese. We've already started in collaboration with Boston College. We offered classes last summer that we're paying for. We have a grant from the Catholic Schools Foundation to pay for this. So we want to keep doing this. And for anybody who's in a high school, just so you know, once they've been in 8 years of Catholic education at the elementary school, their parents will not take no for an answer. They will expect the Catholic high school to accommodate them. And again, will everybody do this? No. But could more of us do it? Yes. One of my jobs in Indianapolis was to grow the special needs population. When I began, about 7% of our students were special needs in the Archdiocese of Indianapolis. By the time I left, it was 19%. Students of all different kinds of disabilities. In fact, there are 13 categories of disability. We had at least 3 students in every category of disability enrolled in at least 1 school in the Archdiocese of Indianapolis. Every single Catholic high school, including the Jesuit College Prep High School, had a special needs program. We can do this. We just have to want to. We just have to say yes. So let's get to work. Our possibilities are endless and our future is bright. Let's not be afraid of failure, but trust in the divine providence that never fails us. The phrase, do not be afraid, is written over 300 times in the Bible. That's kind of like a daily reminder. You don't have to remember it on Christmas, Thanksgiving, you pick the 5. But let's remember that God is with us and that we can approach this task without fear. We can take the opportunities that God has provided and we can move forward. It's scary. In the Archdiocese of Boston right now, we decided to implement both an online testing and a student information system all at once. And it's scary and it's hard. And lots of people said, you shouldn't do it, you can't do it. And we just did it. And has it gone perfectly? No. There are probably teachers and principals who'd like to throw something at me. But We're going to be better on the other side. We just have to get through it, and we are. I'm proud to say, God, I need you tomorrow too, but we have not had glitches with the testing. It's going smoothly. We had over 4,000 kids testing today at one time. So it's working. We'll get there. But you can't be afraid, because if we're afraid, we're not going to move forward. So Pope Francis has given us words of advice. How about his visit last week? Great week to be Catholic, wasn't it? I thought so. So Pope Francis says, do not be afraid to do what God asks you. It is worth saying yes to God. So that's what I'm asking you. I'm asking you to say yes. I want you to go about your work too with joy. We have a great job. I know we don't make as much money as other people. I know that teachers are woefully underpaid, and administrators too. Catholic elementary school principals work 80 million hours a week for very little money. But here's what they don't get that we do. They don't get to see a child learn to read. I still remember teaching kids learning to read and how excited they were when they could. They don't get the hugs that you get. I got a hug today at Mount Alvernia. The kid didn't even know me. I look like somebody he could hug, so I got one. It was good. You get those special smiles. You get the notes that say, I love you. The people who work in banking, they don't get that kind of stuff. Not even close. So they also don't get to see kids who learn, then struggle, then learn some more, then struggle again. They don't get to see it. You have the best job in the world. I have the best job in the world, that of teaching. It is the best. And you have the ability to say yes, and the people who want to be naysayers, they're just negative people and they're not helping us. So just smile at them, please smile. But let's be joyful and go about our work, because we are blessed to be in this unique situation where we get to work with children every day, where we get to share the teachings of Jesus Christ in His church, and we fulfill the commandment to go make disciples of all nations. So go about your work with joy. The future for Catholic education is bright because of you. Your great attitude and enthusiasm make a difference. Your willingness to keep learning and to keep exploring the possibilities keep moving us forward. We can do this. We can turn around Catholic education if we just work together. So if you're going to implement a blended learning model or a language immersion program or become an advanced math and science academy or any other program, discovery learning, that will better serve our students, let's remember what Arthur Ashe said. Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. I have great hope for Catholic education. Do you know where hope is? Hope is in our schools. Hope is that wonderful place between the way things were and the way things are yet to be. Full of hope is a great place to be, and it is where Catholic education lives. We are schools and places of hope. When visiting a Catholic school in the Archdiocese of Boston, I used the restroom, and this is the sign I found hanging on the inside of the door. The men aren't laughing as much as the women. But I wish for all of us the laughter and joy that sign brought to me and then to you, along with the gentle reminder that our lives are good. For all of our problems, life is good. Our God loves us, and we make a difference each day. Pope Francis has said that teaching is an act of love. Let's say yes to sharing that love, and let's build our own version of Catholic education for the 21st century. The people who before us sacrificed everything to build those wonderful schools and churches, what are we going to sacrifice? What are we going to give up to improve Catholic education? Let's build a school community that is inviting, a place where children work towards their potential, a place where each child is receiving the education he or she deserves and needs. Let's fulfill the educational mission of the church and offer strong academics as well as strong faith formation in a supportive atmosphere using the 21st century tools that support our mission. I cannot wait to see what we will do. It is going to be great. And I just want you to know that I'm very proud and happy to be building the future of Catholic education with you. I am so glad that we are saying yes together. Thank you. I've left quite a mess for you, Father.
I think we can all be very glad that you made your way to Boston and that you are leading the Archdiocese of Boston and helping to make Catholic education even greater in our city. Thank you for your inspiring presentation. You present a compelling vision to guide the work of the Archdiocese schools and to inform our collaborations. We are very fortunate to count you among our valued partners. As part of this evening's program, I've asked two Lynch School faculty to briefly comment on the topics of leadership and inclusion in Catholic education and to guide us in linking inquiry and practice. Joseph O'Keefe, S.J., is the former dean of the Lynch School, current professor in the Lynch School Department of Educational Leadership and Higher Education, and director of the Boston College Center for Ignatian Spirituality. Father O'Keefe will offer his remarks first, followed by Dr. Martin Scanlon, associate professor in the Lynch School Department of Educational Leadership. Martin joins our faculty on a full-time basis this year, following 2 years as a visiting associate professor with the Lynch School and the Roche Center for Catholic Education. Joe?
Thank you, Maureen. Let me reiterate the enthusiasm that all of us have for Kathy being here. Again, as a member of the search committee, I think it's one thing Patty did. I think we did very well, actually. I do. And I think the kind of enthusiasm and the kind of hopefulness and the focus on mission and identity is particularly important. And I want to address a little bit some of the issues of context that I think create challenges. And I think when you listen to Kathy, they're challenges that energize, and they are not challenges that paralyze. But they are indeed challenges. I want to talk about some of them. Briefly, I want to talk about some demographic shifts. I want to talk about the graying of the population. I want to talk about issues of competition in the educational marketplace, sticker shock, and the decline of Catholicism, and looking at these within the local context. Demographic shifts. At the beginning of sometime in the early 2000s, a research center at Georgetown did a study of Catholic schools. And they said, people move, schools do not. And that's certainly one of the issues that we find in metropolitan areas. There's been movement from center city to suburbs and exurbs. And there's also been, as a nation, a shift from the Northeast and Midwest to the South. So, for example, Metro West, where many communities are in the Archdiocese of Boston, what 20 years ago were apple orchards are now vibrant communities. Right? And many of the schools and parishes are where Catholics were, not where Catholics are. So that problem, that issue related to demographic mobility. Likewise, if you look at this graphic, the darker blue are places where school-age population is likely to increase between now and 2030. The lighter blue and the blue stripes are those places of decrease. So we do see a shift away from the Northeast and Midwest. And in fact, when we look at the Catholic population, you can see the yellow and blue being the Midwest and the Northeast, and the percentage of Catholics, and you look over time how that percentage goes down, and you look at the South and the West, the blue, the red, and the green, and you see the increase in the Catholic population. So, for example, when we look at the issue of Boston, New York, Chicago, parishes closing, schools merging, very different picture emerges if you're in Raleigh, or Orlando, or Tucson. So, demographic shifts. The graying of the population. This is a projection of the Massachusetts population to 2030. And while the population will increase by probably 5% by 2030, but as you can see, the light green in the bottom are school age, and on top, over 65. So we're dealing with this issue of a changing demographic by age, not just by geography. And of course, that leads to increased competition, right? Basic market economics. The fewer the consumers, the more the competition. Competition for students and competition for philanthropic dollars. Let's look at competition for students. In 1995-96 was the first year that there were charter schools in Massachusetts. There were 15 of them. This year there are 81. 2,000 students in 95-96, 42,000 students now. A study was done in New York that looked at the decline of Catholic schools and the growth of charter schools. It wasn't student by student. We don't know how many kids left Catholic schools to go to charter schools, but clearly it's very plausible that in fact there has been somewhat of an exodus, and that will increase because Charlie Baker is intent on raising the cap on charter schools, saying here, to quote, that there are 37,000 kids waiting and waitlist for charter schools in the Commonwealth. So charter schools are not going to go away, and they will provide, and especially related to the creativity that Kathy talks about that we have to have in our Catholic schools, other people are going to be very creative too. Another issue, and these folks as my last PSLAP cohort, our team, and we looked at the impact of charter schools on districts by surveying superintendents. And how have superintendents responded to this? They put a lot more money into marketing. They've created programs that appeal to parents, right? That they know, any superintendent in the Commonwealth knows, I don't have the exclusive rights to these kids in a geographic catchment area. We need to do something compelling that attracts people. I was, a couple of weeks ago, talked to the faculty and staff at Matignon. I said, you know, for the kids sitting in your classrooms, what, 15, 20 communities they come from? Every superintendent wants that kid. They have to keep their districts thriving. So there's a competitive environment. The other thing too, homeschooling is on the increase. Now, the figures are hard because of the nature of homeschooling, but from everything that I can find, there are now over 2 million kids who are homeschooled in the United States. Sadly, there are fewer than 2 million kids in Catholic schools nationwide for the first time since 1920. And things like the Massachusetts Virtual Academy, which is a virtual charter school that has a very long wait list. So I think Kathy's notions of creativity are especially important given the competitive environment. Competition for philanthropic dollars. We know that issues of access to private education, be it on the elementary, secondary, or higher ed level, depends on philanthropy. If we simply rely on tuition, we will exclude a large number of people who cannot afford a Catholic education. And that's a challenge because of competition. Since the 1990s nationwide, there's been a 40% growth of 501c3s. And there are 33,900 nonprofits in Massachusetts. And when we look at donors and philanthropists, there are all kinds of worthy causes, and people are going into the pockets of donors. So it's a very, and how do we say to donors, you know what? Your top priority needs to be Catholic schools. And we know for some it has been, but I think that energy of making a very case that is attractive, that is compelling, is crucial. It can't just be business as usual anymore. Sticker shock. Now I did a little calculation. If we had a young person going into preschool at Columkills, continuing through 8th grade, going to St. Joseph's Prep High School, and I see the two heads of school here, and then coming here to Boston College, given current tuition rates, how much money do you think we're talking about? Any guess? $354,000, not accounting for inflation. Now, we all know that at Columkills, at St. Joe's Prep, at Boston College, we give financial aid, we try to meet need, but we know we don't meet need as much as we want to. And we also know there's something called sticker shock, that people see the price and they say, ooh, can't do that. And especially they're fearful because we also know throughout private education on every level, people are amassing a lot of debt. And in times of financial insecurity, I think that since 2008, and now we have our stock market kind of going up and down, people are really fearful to make the kind of financial outlay that it takes. That's a challenge, right? The decline of Catholicism. Now, when people, I often talk about, say, one of the things, and any kind of sociologist of religion would say, one of the great phenomena of the last generation has been, in America, the great increase in the number of nuns. And Catholic audiences look at me like, what? Because they're thinking N-U-N-S, nuns. I'm talking about N-O-N-E-S, nuns, people with no religious affiliation. That is the fastest growing religious demographic, and the younger the population, the greater likelihood that they would claim no religious affiliation. Particularly acute in Massachusetts. According to the Pew Forum on Religion and Public Life, the most recent data we have, they looked at, from 2007 to 2014, the percent of Catholics in Massachusetts went from 43%, and that would be people who would simply say, self-identify, to 34%, and the number of nuns, N-O-N-E-S, went from 17% to 32%. And in many ways, a very heavily Catholic area traditionally, which isn't anymore. In fact, and this was a stunning, when I discovered this, if you look at Boston, this is the largest U.S. metropolitan area by religious affiliation. In the city of Boston, we're not talking about the Archdiocese, we're talking about the city of Boston, 33% would claim no religious affiliation. 29% would claim to be Catholic. Now, if you've lived in these parts for a while, or if you grew up here, that's a pretty stunning statistic. And what it says is we have to provide and present a compelling picture of the joy of a Catholic way of life. And I think you heard that in Kathy's presentation and how important that is. Even for those who do claim a religious affiliation, this looks at patterns of regular church attendance. The greener you are, the higher the level of church attendance. The bluer you are, the lower the level of church attendance. Well, you can see New England now becoming one of the areas of the country that has the lowest levels of church attendance. And this isn't just for Catholics, this is across various denominations. November 6th, we all know the movie that will be coming out called Spotlight, which chronicles the events of 2002 and the Globe uncovering the sex abuse scandal in the Archdiocese. Again, the statistics there's not one reason for these statistics that I represented around the decline of Catholicism. It's a secularization, irrelevance of religion generally, I'm spiritual but not religious, that kind of mentality, a lack of belief in God. But clearly, the impact. And how do we convince people, and I think people do know that in many ways, no child is safer than a Catholic institution because of the safeguards that we have put in place. But on November 6th, in many ways, the wound, the deep wound is going to be reopened for us as we relive this. And someone did have a preview, who's actually on the Jesuit Province Review Committee that looks over any accusations. And she said it is very compelling. It's very fair, wonderful acting, and very compelling. So our local church is wounded, and we need to heal those wounds. I think we looked at history, and our friend Jim O'Toole in the history department did a wonderful book on the history of Catholicism. And I think when we look back, we might see, well, you know, perhaps back in the 60s, things seemed prosperous and stable and growing. But really, when we look back at the 200 plus years in the history of the Archdiocese, they didn't face the same issues we face, but they faced daunting challenges. It's sort of like the Providence Sisters way back in 168 years ago. And we need to reflect on that yes, we have our particular challenges in our era, but every era has challenges, and people rose to the occasion. And we need to do the same. And I think especially when we look at our history, you know, the history of Catholic schools in the U.S. has been the history of immigrants and providing opportunities for immigrants. And so I want to close with these words from Pope Francis. He says, "The Church in the U.S. knows, like few others, the hopes present in the hearts of these pilgrims." The way he talks about immigrants. "From the beginning, you have learned their languages, promoted their cause, made their contributions your own, defended their rights, helped them to prosper, and kept alive the flame of their faith. Even today, no American institution does more for immigrants than your Christian communities. Now you are facing this stream of Latin immigration which affects many of your dioceses. Not only as Bishop of the South of Rome, but as a pastor from the South, I feel the need to thank and encourage you. Perhaps it will not be easy for you to look into their soul. Perhaps you will be challenged by their diversity. But know that they also possess resources meant to be shared. So do not be afraid to welcome them. And I think if we make a compelling case for Catholic schools, and especially when we look at our own archdiocese, our city, which is a gateway to people from around the world, we need to find ways to welcome them. We need to find ways to allow their gifts to enrich our society and enrich our church. So Kathy, when someone said, could you use an adjective to describe Kathy? I said, brave. But it's your enthusiasm, your focus on mission, and your deeply held conviction that I know from our conversations that we need to move, and that we need to change, and we need to embrace a future. And that these realities don't paralyze us, but these realities energize us. So thank you for your energy.
Well, it's my privilege and my pleasure to be here and offer my remarks with two renowned scholars in the field of education, not only nationally but internationally. Superintendent Mears has described her vision for the Archdiocese for Catholic schools, saying yes, extending invitation. Dr. O'Keefe has described some local and national trends and competition and growth mode and where we are going. In my brief remarks, and I was told to make them brief, so I wrote them down because we can run them out very easily when we get in faculty. In my brief remarks, I hope to complement these two perspectives. And I entitled these remarks, Catholic Schools Moving from Exclusion to Inclusion. I've been studying Catholic schools for the past decade and active in Catholic schools for the last 4 decades, from a student to a teacher to an administrator to a board member. So I have my heart deeply in Catholic schools. A consistent line in my research in Catholic schools examines how and when Catholic schools enact Catholic social teaching. There's 3 core tenets of Catholic social teaching that apply very well and very directly to Catholic schools. One of those is recognizing the dignity of the human person. A second of those is protecting the common good. And the third of those tenets of Catholic social teaching that apply directly to Catholic schools is placing a preferential option for the marginalized. Historically, Catholic schools have enacted these 3 tenets imperfectly and inconsistently. For instance, Catholic schools at select times and in different contexts have served significant numbers of students who are economically disadvantaged, who live in poverty. And when they do, they typically serve such students quite well, reducing gaps in achievement between those students and their more affluent counterparts. Yet, as we have heard tonight, and as many of us know from our own experiences, this is a particular challenge in Catholic schools. Over the past half-century, shifts in governance and shifts in financing have reduced our capacities to serve students living in poverty. This is one example of exclusion, if we think about moving from exclusion to inclusion. My research focuses on 2 populations that I'd like to highlight. How do Catholic schools develop the capacity to move from exclusion to inclusion, And I want not to focus on students in poverty, but two other populations. The first is culturally and linguistically diverse students. Historically, Catholics have served an immigrant church. My own father-in-law in De Pere, Wisconsin, spoke Polish in his Catholic school. Since the mid-20th century, however, Catholic schools have struggled to excel in this area. Today, most of our Catholic schools are monolingual. And even though we serve many immigrant students whose mother tongue are not English, we are underdeveloped in our capacity to do that. However, indications suggest that some Catholic schools are beginning to return to the historic roots of embracing these immigrant communities. A bellwether of this change is here at Boston College, where the Roche Center for Catholic Education launched the two-way immersion network for Catholic schools 3 years ago. Two-way immersion education is an extremely effective model for serving students who are English language learners. These schools take students whose mother tongues are Spanish or Chinese and group them together with students whose native tongue is English. Together, all the students grow bilingual. A few years ago, when this was launched, in the country, only a few Catholic schools were dabbling in the two-way immersion model. Now, with Twin CS, 18 schools across the country are participating in a coordinated network, transforming schools from monolingual English to bilingual education. As a bilingual school, these students enact Catholic social teaching. They promote the common good. They embrace the dignity of each child, and they place a preferential option on those who are marginalized in our society. The demographic shifts that Dr. O'Keefe just shared speak to the need for this. This is not the only example of how Catholic schools are serving culturally and linguistically diverse students, but it's one of the most promising. And this is particularly the case in light of the research done by Boston College's own Hausman Ospino on the central role of Hispanics shaping the future of the Catholic Church. A second example of this move from exclusion to inclusion regards students with special needs, which Superintendent Mears raised herself. I use special needs, as she did, as a broad category encompassing both diagnosed disabilities but also other exceptionalities. Historically, again, evidence suggests that many Catholic schools did accept some students with special needs. Anecdotes abound about how Catholic schools, in the words of famous Catholic education scholar John Convey, said, how Catholic schools took all comers in many contexts. Yet public schools in the 1970s began to more comprehensively meet students' special needs, particularly those with diagnosed disabilities. And by comparison, Catholic schools found themselves with relatively little resources and expertise. As a result, in recent decades, many Catholic schools have, as a matter of course, not developed comprehensive service delivery models to meet students' special needs. Yet, here again, indications are suggesting a shift and a changing tide. Many examples are emerging across the country that illustrate this. For instance, in some school dioceses, some of these are emerging within dioceses, like the Archdiocese of St. Louis and the Archdiocese of Milwaukee, which are developing the learning consultant model, which brings a special educator on faculty to work alongside the classroom teacher. Some of these are emerging through targeted partnerships with colleges and universities. The Loyola Marymount University partnering with the Diocese of Orange to develop a universal design for learning program, or our own newly formed certificate for Catholic school educators here at Boston College and the Archdiocese is an example of such a targeted partnership. Others are catalyzed by external organizations like the Fire Foundation in the Archdiocese of Kansas City and St. Joseph, which is reaching out to give the necessary financial and human resources to Catholic schools to accommodate students' special needs. Or in Florida, where the McKay Scholarship is available for students who have a diagnosed disability, and any parent who is not satisfied with the public school in which the child can choose a private or another public school for that child. So these two examples show some movement from exclusion to inclusion, from exclusivity to inclusivity in Catholic schools in the United States in terms of serving culturally and linguistically diverse students and in terms of serving students with special needs. As the movement continues to other populations and in other contexts, Catholic schools align our practices with our Catholic social teaching. Importantly, schools across sectors benefit when we advance the common good and place this preferential option for the marginalized. Finally, this movement from exclusion to inclusion is congruent with a theme of Pope Francis and his papacy. By now, Pope Francis is well known for his trenchant critique of the pervasive problems of exclusion and exploitation. Perhaps slightly less well known is the powerful antidote that he promotes, captured in the word encounter. Francis frequently invites listeners to engage in relationships with people who are commonly perceived as outcasts, as useless, who are taken advantage of and then discarded. Earlier this year, in his homeland of Argentina, he extolled, "When you meet those most in need, your heart will begin to grow bigger. Reaching out multiplies our capacity to love. An encounter with others makes our hearts bigger. Take courage." So whether defending the dignity of the poor, or protecting immigrants, or reaching out to the homeless, or cherishing our natural world, Francis describes practical experiences, not abstract principles. Through encounters with the oppressed, the vulnerable, the downtrodden, we learn to love. So perhaps an essential component to Catholic schools moving from exclusion to inclusion involves fostering encounters. When I reflect on my own research examining how and when Catholic schools transform in this manner, I'm struck by the prevalence of encounters. One memorable example illustrates this. A nun in a Midwestern city that did an incredible job serving students with a wide range of exceptionalities, from cerebral palsy to Down syndrome to learning disabilities, educating these children right next to typically developing kids. When I asked her in the course of the research, how did she do it? She had a very practical and direct philosophy. She said, "I say yes and figure it out." Here, encounter is central. Sister met the individual as an individual. She sees them as a person, as someone made in the image and likeness of God, and considers the opportunity in that child. So consider the opportunities to encounter that we create when our classrooms in Catholic schools are rich in cultural and linguistic diversity. Consider the encounters that we create as our Catholic schools become richer in meeting students' special needs. And as we look to the future of this sector and partner with the Archdiocese of Boston, we will all be better served to the degree that we cultivate school communities in which all encounter inclusivity. Thank you.
insightful comments, and I especially want to thank Superintendent Mears for taking time out of her very busy schedule to speak with us this evening. The opportunity to hear more about your vision and share ideas was certainly reap benefits for many. If you'd like to come up on the stage, I think we I know I'm standing between you and a nice reception we're interested in inviting you to shortly, but I also wanted to give you an opportunity to ask some questions since you've been sitting attentively for a long time, and we have 3 wonderful leaders and scholars here to speak with you tonight. So Kendra has a mic, and if you have some questions, and we'll let you.
Hi, good evening. I'm Allie Dutson from Mission Grammar School, and I am just wondering, and appreciate all of our wonderful voices for tonight, but I'm wondering if each of you would like to share a little bit about where you see Catholic education in 5 years in the Archdiocese of Boston. What is your dream statement? What is your dream? Where do you want us to be?
I'll go first. Okay, I'll sit back and relax. Allie, we are going to be even more fabulous than we are now. We are going to be robust in the use of technology because that assists many learners. We're going to be very much more inclusive in terms of culturally and linguistically diverse children and children with special needs. And they're all going to work and learn side by side together. And my dream is that our children would be able to attend Mass once a week, because right now we can't offer that. And so we would be going to Mass more frequently. I think that would be wonderful for our students. And our buildings might be a little spruced up because they are clean. I'm telling you, I cannot believe how clean we can get buildings that are 150 years old. They are clean, but they need a little TLC. So that's where I think we're going to be. And we're going to have great principals like you leading the way.
My dream is that in 5 years, the Archdiocese of Boston Catholic Schools have 2 bilingual schools, 1 Spanish English and 1 Chinese English or another language, that there's a system in the other schools to affirm bilingualism, and that all schools are on their way in some specific manner to explicitly embrace students with special needs. And some schools are leading that way, in the exceptional ones that are already, say, including some students with Down syndrome that Superintendent Mears shared with us, but that all schools see that as part of what they're doing. They don't say, oh, a kid with special needs, we've got a couple of schools that are for them, they're over here, they're those ones. No, that all schools see that as part of their Catholic community. So that's my vision.
It's appropriate that we focused on students, and I think within 5 years to continue to focus on students, but to see students as members of families and communities. That our ministry is not just to the people, young people in the school, it is to their families and their communities. And my hope is that the Catholic schools will become real vehicles for the renewal of faith in this part of the world, for encounter with God, and for conveying to families and neighborhoods that Catholicism is a way of life worth living. I think for many people, for a host of reasons, some of which I described, the school has become the church for them. It's the only connection point that they have with the institutional church. And I think we need to be maybe more mindful of that in our planning, in our professional development activities, and how we structure. So I think ministry to families is particularly important, and I hope we do that better.
That was a great question, Allie. How about other questions from the audience? A few.
Hi, Mary Ann. I'm at St. Paul's in Hingham. I'm observing an enrollment decline, partially with the 7th and 8th graders being able to attend some of the high schools. So I think there's a need for reconfiguring. I know they've started a 3-year-old program, but I happen to be a special educator, so I'm very happy to hear that this is something that we're going to look at as well. So one of my questions is, how do you facilitate special education when there's a difficulty with services being provided in the public school, but they will not provide the services in your school? So there's a funding challenge and a support challenge in terms of the school wanting to help the students. You have families who may have one child who has moderate special needs and 2 others in the family, and the child with special needs, whose needs are not met, needs to go attend the public school. So I think I wrote a paper about this 10 years ago, and now it's a big problem. How do you see the Catholic schools facilitating that in the Catholic schools?
One, we're on October 16th, we're actually having people from USDOE come to speak to our principals and teachers, anybody come and join us, about how to access the federal dollars, because truthfully, the money that is allocated are to be used on services for that child, and the services can happen in the Catholic school. That's allowed by law. So that's an opportunity for us to be in more dialogue with the public schools about that. And we need to, one, help our current teachers understand things that they can do, and 2, we probably need to hire professionals ourselves who will work in our schools to provide those services. Many of our schools have begun that, but again, we're taking the steps necessary, but that will grow. As a teacher, I started a special needs program in a Catholic elementary school in 1986, and then started one in a Catholic high school in 1992. Both those programs still continue today. They're still serving students, but they've grown. There are now 3 teachers there who work to support it. So it will happen, and it will just become part of the culture. And everybody will just think this is normal. I promise you that will happen. It's just going to take some time. But the people who have the least problem with it are our students. They'll be fine with it. So everybody's always afraid, oh, if we do that, we're going to lower our standards. We're not lowering anybody's standards. When they hired me in the Archdiocese of Indianapolis to do this, during the same 5 years that we increased our special needs enrollment from 8 to 19%, we earned 25 blue ribbons. 25 schools earned blue ribbons during the same time we were growing our special needs. The 2 are not incompatible at all. So at least anyone think that, oh, we're going to lower our standard. We're not lowering any standard. In fact, we need to raise it a little bit. But we can do this, and we're going to take different steps. And as you said so well, some people are going to be more ready than others, but all of us are going to move forward.
I think, when Kathy talked about the federal government, not only is it allowed, but it's mandated by federal law. So 2 things. First, with the reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which is currently before Congress, that provision remains there. But I think we need to do some political organizing work to ensure that those entitlement programs include kids in private schools. So that could easily be lost, and we don't want that to happen. Secondly, and practically, I think the story of, the money comes from the feds to the state, gets filtered through the local district. And obviously, the local district wants to keep as much money for itself, right? That's the job. So I think if there are good relations, and I think that happens between the local Catholic school, the superintendent, or the central administration of the school district, of working together rather than stonewalling each other when it comes to, so political activism to ensure that this mandate for our kids in our schools continues, and becoming partners with local school districts to ensure that we work together for the welfare of every kid in the town.
I would echo the comments that have been made. Knowing the law and accessing the federal resource is very important. A theme that Superintendent Mears brought up in her talk about developing teachers one of the strategies that's effective across sectors is dual certification for teachers, and working with universities like Boston College to say, how can we incentivize and support teachers in getting dual certification, so we're growing our own capacity in that way. And communicating the vision often is the precursor to attracting the philanthropic support. In the Archdiocese of Milwaukee, where I come from, that was a big precursor in the schools who were at the cutting edge. It was expressing the vision of how are we going to educate these children, and then attracting the funding that was necessary for them. In those schools, it wasn't, there was some of the federal access, but a lot of it was philanthropic, but it doesn't come, you can't fund something that you don't articulate as a fundable option. So that's what I would add.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question, if there's another brave soul.
Actually, I have another one.
You have another one, yay.
Pertaining to the statistics, thank you.
Pertaining to the statistics on homeschooling, that implies that parents are pretty discouraged with the options available. To replace Catholic school, however, because most of those are Christian, I know a woman with 9 children homeschooled, and she's actually a Catholic school teacher now. But some of the issues, I think, are the public school they don't want, definitely. Sometimes the Catholic school is aligning with curriculum or Common Core or whatever it may be that becomes too much alike, too much like what they're trying to get away from. So do you see a restoration of true, authentic Catholic curriculum to perhaps get some of those students that are homeschooling to avoid Catholic public schools?
A lot of the more recent studies of homeschooling indicate that people do it for a very wide variety of reasons. I think the access to curriculum via technology creates options that weren't there before. Some of it has to do with mobility. Yes, for some people we don't like public schools, but for some people it's not against something, but it's for something else. Okay, so, and I think we need to kind of look at some of those assumptions. The other thing that's happening increasingly, what I see developing is a real hybrid that, for example, let's say you're homeschooling through the virtual charter school in Massachusetts, but you want your kid to participate in interscholastic athletics, and so you go to the local district. I don't know if it's going to be that much on either you're homeschooled or you're in school. I think we'll see emerging a kind of hybrid. I think that my understanding and my belief about standards and accountability, for example, in things like the Common Core, numeracy, literacy, all of those basic issues, I think are important. And remember, that was kind of the states did that. It's not a federal, it's a state thing. So I think that notion of preparing young people for the workplace and all that, I don't see that as incompatible with a way of integrating Catholicism throughout the curriculum, and the kind of history that we teach, and the kind of literature that we expose kids to, and the kind of ethics that we teach. So high standards, and I think Catholic schools need to prepare people as well as any other sector of schools, and to do that in a way that is not abandoning the uniqueness of mission and identity.
Well said. We are working diligently in that area. Dr. Amy Ryan is standing in the back, and she is leading our charge. We are coming up. We don't want to write curriculum. I believe that belongs in the school. And if I have a twin immersion program, I would have a different curriculum from a school that is a medical arts or a science or a discovery school. So I don't want to write curriculum. We want standards for our students that they would be able to, things they know, understand, and be able to do. And Amy is working on that. We're taking volunteers. If you want to be a part of that committee, let her know. She's waving to you. But because we want to have high standards. What's the most important is what Father said, is that we make sure that we're teaching the faith when we're teaching the classes. So when we're teaching about the planets, that they know God's the creator of the universe. When we teach about earthquakes, that the scripture reading that when Christ died, the earth shook. And we bring in all the scripture and our church doctrine throughout the day. The word with encounter that Martin used is a great word, and we want to provide multiple encounters for our children with Christ every day. And so that's the basic foundation. There are lots of standards in the world, and they're all, truthfully, most of them look a lot alike. They really do. And I think that we want to make sure that our standards are high and rigorous so that our students will do well, no matter what their next step is in the world. If it's more education, a job, whatever it is, we want them to be prepared for that, knowing that they were created by God and that there's truth and reason that work very nicely, compatibly, and that will guide them throughout their life.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to attend this night, this evening with us. And I'm particularly grateful to Superintendent Mears and also to my fellow colleagues for joining us here this evening and taking the time out. This was certainly an inspiring and energizing evening. And if you didn't have an opportunity to ask a question now to the panel, hopefully they'll be able to stick around a little while and join us in the reception, and you can, in the rear of the room, and you can ask some further questions then. So thank you, and hope to see you around the Lynch School.